I'm Officer Jeremy Howery with the Speedway Police Department. I'm your Community Crime Watch Liaison, along with Lieutenant Jacob McAtee. We're presenting tonight the Keeping Your Children Safe, What We Have Learned from Child Molesters, presented by Officer Ray Tice. Ray's a 14-year veteran, been with us for a year, coming real soon, and he lateraled over from Franklin, Indiana Police, and we're glad to have you, Ray. So we're gonna go ahead and bring you up and let you do your thing. All right.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see everyone come out here today. Like Officer Howery said, my name is Ray Tice. I'm an officer here with the Speedway Police Department, about to celebrate my 1-year anniversary here. But as of tomorrow, I will have been a police officer for 14 years. For the past 10 years before coming here to Speedway, past 13 years before coming to Speedway, I was an officer and a detective with the Franklin Police Department. The past 10 years that I was there, I was a detective there, with the last 3 years there, with my specialty being with sex crimes. It's a crime that's I'm very passionate about, is protecting the children, protecting victims of sexual assaults. And this training that I'm going to give tonight details things that we need to look at, because there's lots of misconceptions about child molesters, the way that they think, the way that they act, and there's also maybe some different things that we can be doing as parents or concerned community members about protecting our children from them. The presentation I have has numerous videos in it. There's going to be interviews in the videos with people who are accused of child molesting and people who are guilty of child molesting. So some of the videos, the person may actually have molested children. Other ones are just people who have been accused of molesting children. So there'll be different things that you'll hear from there that you can just kind of decide for yourself if the person's guilty or innocent. We're going to go ahead and get this started. Is it coming up on the screen here? Okay. There we go. I've already done the welcome and introduction. The agenda that we're going to be looking at, there's going to be some dry parts on this where I will need to be reading off the screen. Usually as a presenter, I hate to just be reading directly off the screen because you can read yourself, but there's lots of numbers I want to make sure that I get correct while we're going over them. We're going to talk about offenders, the stats of offenders, and also how they groom the children into to a point where they are able to go ahead and sexually assault them. And then we're going to be talking about prevention. Ultimately, prevention, there's lots of different tactics that we can use. There's lots of different ways to think that are going to help us protect our children. So with this presentation, there is going to be some rather harsh information in it. There's going to be some harsh language you're going to be hearing directly from convicted child molesters, and they don't hold back. So I want to go ahead and just kind of do a blanket statement here right now that there are some issues here in the presentation that can be upsetting to people, be it a former victim or a current victim or not. This is just stuff that we don't really like to hear about, but this is stuff that we need to know about. So when you're watching this, take some time just to kind of reflect on it, what you learned about it. There's a lot, you're going to want to immediately start talking to your kids or kids that you care about when you hear this presentation about things that you're going to learn about. But take a beat. Take some time to really kind of reflect on everything that you've learned and be able to put together your own strategy about how you're going to talk to your children. The credit for this workshop goes to an Oregon-based sex offender treatment program, and Corey Jewel Jensen is a sex offender expert who developed the project in 2000 as a way to share information about sex offenders with the public. When I initially took this training, this is not my original training. This is something that I went to go to and learned about myself. It was a 2-day-long training. It was instructed by Corey Jewel Jensen. She's very knowledgeable. She's gathered a lot of information, and she's been able to put together a good program. That was about 5 or 6 years ago when I went to this training. And it had what we're going to learn today, but then it also went beyond that, where it was talking to investigators about how to investigate these crimes. A couple of years later, I was happy to see that it was not only being put on again close to me, but they were also doing a training for the trainer, where they gave us this program and taught us how to present this presentation to the public. So I was happy to do that. That was at the beginning of 2019. So unfortunately, some things kind of got in the way. Then, of course, with 2020, with all the COVID restrictions, I wasn't able to do the presentation. So I'm happy to finally be doing it. And you're my first audience with this. So I'm awfully happy that we get to go through this. And like I said, with the important information, I'm happy to present it finally. So for the goals of the presentation, we're going to be better equipped to protect our children and our family. And that's not just your own children. That's children in the community, children that you care about, relatives, friends' children. Hopefully it's going to give you some information that you should be able to impart the information that you get, and also be able to talk to children on your own about what's going on with their parents. We're going to become a better educated community member. You're going to be a better neighbor, church member, youth sports service volunteer, voter, and jury member. With being a detective there in Franklin, I'm still going back and doing some trials. And so I've been a part of trials before where just it felt like the jury members weren't really educated on this, where they thought, well, you know, the child took too long to tell anybody about this, so they must have been making it up. And that's just not true. You're going to see a lot of delayed disclosures. We'll talk about that during the presentation. So hopefully you garner information through this presentation that you're able to become a good jury member if you ever have to sit on a jury for something like this. So one thing about this presentation is it sounds like a lot of gloom and doom, where you're going to be leaving here thinking everybody's an offender, everybody's a pervert. And that's not what we want to do here today. I know that's going to be some really hard information, but I want you to know that besides building a good knowledge base on how to handle this, I also want you to know that it is a small percentage of the population. However, that population that's within the community, we have some pretty big numbers on there, where 90% of those people who molest children are male. They're thinking 1 out of 10 to 25 males may be a sexual offender. And we hear those numbers, so you think, well, it just must be males. It's not so much that. Looking at the picture here, we have women, we have older, we have younger, we have very young there in the right corner. It's not just males. You need to open up the possibility of everyone who can offend on something like this. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have with children, to have with parents and families about sex, about sexual assault, body safety. But the thing that we need to focus on is if we're not talking to them about it, who is talking to them about it? Who is educating them on something like this? We need to keep the lines of communication open and open early. So we're going to have a pre-test here. Don't worry, you don't have to take out pencil and paper, nothing like that. I'll give you all the answers. How many children are sexually abused prior to age 18, on average? You don't have to shout it out, you can just think about it. 1 out of 5 girls, 1 out of 10 boys. How many offenders are out there? On average, 1 in every 10 to 20 males have abused children. How'd they get that way? Early exposure to pornography, excessive sexual contact with other children, or sexual abuse. We'll go into detail about all this throughout the presentation. How many crimes do they commit prior to apprehension? 120 to 200. Do they always commit the same kinds of crimes? No. 40 to 60% of offenders engage in more than one type of sexual crime. Again, we'll go into detail about all this. How many children will they abuse? On average, offenders have abused between 12 to 30 victims prior to arrest. Do I know any sex offenders? Unfortunately, the odds are that you do. We're going to review child sexual abuse, exactly what it is. Child sexual abuse is sexual contact between an adult and a minor. Now, the age of consent in Indiana is 16 years old. Before then, from 0 to 14 years old, is child molestation. Any sexual act with a child is child molestation. Between 14 to 16 years old, that's sexual misconduct with a minor. After they turn 16, it's considered rape. Now, 16 is considered the age of consent in Indiana, but you have, when we're talking about molesters and the people that they may know, we're talking about people who are in any sort of authority over them. Teachers, scout leaders, church members, anyone who's considered in a position of authority over them, any child under the age of 18 is considered child seduction. So even if they're 16 age of consent, that's still a sexual crime if they're considered a part of a person of authority over them. Sexual contact between minors is child sexual abuse. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, about how studies have shown that a person gets started on this path. Child sexual abuse consists of fondling, intercourse, vaginal or anal penetration, or oral or genital contact, exposing children to pornography or using them for pornography, having sex in front of children, taking sexually explicit pictures of children, trafficking, allowing, encouraging other people to have sex with a child. Did you know as many as 400,000 children born in the U.S. this year will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday? So we're talking about 1 out of 5 girls and 1 out of 10 boys. Children that are aged 7 to 9 are the most commonly abused. And here's the number that we don't like. Only 5 to 18% of children victims will tell anyone. We'll talk about later here in the presentation about why children aren't telling. More trauma occurs when children are abused by someone they're close to, love, or depend on. We're going to talk about how we focus on stranger danger so much with children and how that's not the only thing that we should be talking with them about. But if you think about this, when it's somebody that they know, when it's a family member, when it's someone trusted by the family, how much support are they getting from their household? If a little child comes up and tells their parent that grandpa or grandma are abusing them, and then you don't have that support because you're going to have the family not believing them, you're going to have people who are taking sides, and the child's going to have to live with that. And so that's really very traumatic to them. But when it's a neighbor, when it's just a friend of the family, when it's a stranger, they have the entire family supporting them. Everyone believes them. Everyone cooperates with the investigation. So when we're talking about trauma with the people that they know and that they trust, we're talking about that, just the support that they get and people believing them. More trauma results when children are not believed or supported when they tell. The amount of trauma is not necessarily determined by the sex act involved. I've done hundreds of investigations with this. And it's not so much what happened to them, it's who was doing it. I'm not going to go into details because it's just not respectful, but I've had children that things have happened to that you can just consider the worst of the worst, and then things that you may not consider as bad, something minor. And the worst of the worst children, they may not have been able to really take in everything that was going on, and they may be able to recover a lot more quickly than the stuff that's minor just because of who was doing it to them. Most children can recover from abuse, and that's going to make a world of difference for them with the support of the family, getting proper treatment, getting counseling, great investigation, just conviction, everything else. The support's going to make all the difference. Most children who are being sexually abused do not show any symptoms. Out of all my investigations, it was always, well, they started acting differently, so that's when I knew that they were being sexually abused. They may not show any symptoms because they may be bottling it all in. And when they're finally showing symptoms, that's when they're so overwhelmed with everything that's happening, is that they can't take this anymore. But it's the grooming technique that the offender's using on them, building them up, making them think everything's okay. Again, we'll get much more into this as we get further into the presentation. But everything that builds up to it, they may not show symptoms immediately while it's happening. Only 4% of cases have medical evidence of abuse. And this is because it's not being reported immediately. When something has directly happened that day, within a couple hours, anything else, yeah, you're going to get a multitude of great medical evidence of the abuse. But when this has been going on for years and they're finally talking about it years later, you don't have that evidence anymore. Now this print is pretty small here. I see that we do have some note takers here. I'm just going to go over this pretty quickly, but some things that you need to watch out for with children. A change in modesty, genital pain, itching, discharge, bleeding, stomach aches, headaches, sleep disturbances, bedwetting, unexplained fears or refusal to go to places or with people, school problems, problems with peers, excessive crying and depression, clinginess, aggressiveness, Escape behavior, and when I'm talking about escape behavior, that's drinking, drugs, running away. Age inappropriate understanding of sex, overly sexualized behavior, strange fears or discomfort or fear of a certain person, fire setting, abuse of animals, get it checked out. Some of this stuff, it doesn't automatically mean that they're being molested, that they're a victim of anything, but it's always still good to get it checked out if you're noticing these types of changes. Most victims are not afraid of the offender, and that's because of the grooming process. We'll talk about the grooming process, and I know that I keep saying that we'll talk about this, but we're setting it up here. Most child victims will continue to have mixed feelings about the offender. Child victims do not always act like we think they will. With my investigations that I had, I can't tell you how many times I would hear the person that was reporting it say, I don't really believe them because they didn't really act like they had been abused. We don't know what a person is going to act like when they've been abused. We definitely see some things that we've been able to learn from other investigations that I've done, or just people that we know who have talked to us about it, but you don't absolutely know what a person's going to act like. I heard a lot of times, well, I was a victim of sexual abuse, and I know what I acted like, and they didn't act like that. Again, you just don't know what a person's going to act like. Everyone's going to take these things differently. Here's our first video. This is Patrick, the youth pastor. He's accused of molesting a boy in the church. And I'm just going to play the video. We'll stop halfway through. Like I told you, some of these videos are people who are just accused and were proven to be innocent. Some of these people actually did commit the acts that they're being accused of. So we're going to go to Patrick. I'll stop about halfway through so we can talk about him, okay?
This young minister has been accused of child sexual abuse. He's an outstanding member of the community, widely respected and well-liked. He has no criminal record of any sort. Is he guilty? You decide.
I was a youth minister, an assistant minister. It was a rather small congregation for our community, around 200 to 300 people, at best 300. And I feel the needs of an assistant pastor, an associate minister, a deacon, and the highest being elder pastor, and working with the youth of the congregation. He was a kid at church, underprivileged. He came in with a group of other children, and I reached out and tried to help him as no one else would. And just like the kids that normally are underprivileged, they try to take advantage of people who help them. Obviously, he has a lot of disturbances, mental problems. I think if you'll look in his records, he was even in a mental institution for 3 years before coming to church. Before being in the boys' home. He has a criminal record anyway. Yes, I think ministers are victimized by false reports. They have a very sensitive job. They are out there working with people constantly. They're alone, many times unsupervised. The only person with them, of course, would be the minister and the child, or the minister and the accusing victim, if you will. So who's to say that the minister didn't do it? Most 80% of the time, I would say, the victim is believed more than the minister. And it's because of all the heightened hoopla over victims and all that stuff. It's ridiculous. Ministers too much are victimized themselves for their kind deeds. People want to get money out of them if they're a little bit successful. Then their entire reputation is shot. They go back into the ministry, and they may say they trust them, but they're never totally trusted again. Their entire education, work, whatever they've gone through for years has gone down the drain, never to be fully restored, never to be fully recapacitated as what was before. It's a shame. And it's extremely discouraging. I have spent 2 years in seminary. I'm the youngest deacon of the Methodist Church in the state. And it's absolutely, all of that prior effort and work, my entire life dream, the hopes of my parents, is now being questioned. I only hope God deals mercifully with them.
All right. I'm not going to make you answer out loud. Let's just do hands here where we have. How many people think guilty? How many people think innocent? Okay. All right. I lied to everybody here. All the videos are child molesters that we have here. It's not some are innocent, some are guilty. I'm pretty sure you saw through that when I said it initially anyway. Yes. He was accused and he is currently incarcerated in this video. The person interviewing him is named Dr. Salter. Dr. Salter went to this prison to do a study on grooming habits of child molesters. Patrick decided that he would speak with her about this. We're going to go into him talking about what he did. And I can tell you that looking at his file, the doctor saw that he maybe had 100 victims throughout his career. Now think about this too with everything that he said. We'll listen to him here in a second. But we're going to talk about grooming of children, but I also want you to consider grooming of families as well. What did he just say there? What's he pointing out? He's discrediting the child. He's talking about everything that he has done, giving all of his credentials, talking about how people in his position are falsely accused of this type of stuff because people are trying to get things from them. So who's he grooming? Is he grooming the child or is he grooming the adult here?
Grooming the adult.
Yeah.
What's the truth? Was he falsely accused, as he claims?
I had 53 hands-on definite victims, and there are 42 other ones that can be questioned as far as age and so forth is concerned. I have 53 minor victims.
There's been a tremendous increase in child sexual abuse reports in the last decade. Some of the accused have been highly respected members of the community. Many people wonder whether such respectable citizens could be child abusers. This film will explore this whole issue. Can you tell if someone is a child molester by their standing in the community, how well you know them, or how aggressively they deny it?
In fact, did you molest Mikey?
Yes, I did. I molested Mikey on numerous occasions throughout a 3-year period, from the time beginning at 9 until he was 12 years old. I knew Michael before he began coming to the congregation where I attended. I worked many times with the people in his area with problem children. As an older teenager, I would go out and assist people in the boys' homes and so forth for little small things like baseball games, softball games, etc. And as a matter of fact, I chose him because he was as a victim, because he was a problem child, because people neglected him and oftentimes pushed him aside, and I knew it would be easy for me to get close to him, to be his friend, if you will. And then, again, I also knew if he told, that there would be little or small amounts of belief in him. No one would believe him, basically, if he told. And in fact, they didn't. When he did tell, and when it became a bigger issue, when I was investigated, the head of the department of my county told me, he said, "You have nothing to worry about." He said, "We can tell from the very beginning that this is all a big scheme," and it was dropped almost as quickly as it came about. I was caught twice before I was incarcerated. Really, it wasn't being caught, it was I was told on twice before being incarcerated. They were not believed the first 2 times. I had many people, counselors, church leaders of the community, to come up and stand in my defense several times in those occasions, and it was simply just totally disbelieved. Even the second time, it was more stood out against than the first time, because they thought, well, here he goes again, this young man trying to help unfortunate children, and they're turning against him. And I was even told as much to say, I had a minister come to me and tell me, he said, Patrick, what's going on is, you'll run across it many times. People you try to help will stab you in the back. He said, roll with the punches, stick with it, you're doing a good job. He said, and in the end, you'll be blessed for it.
Anything of that? So he was accused twice before, and nothing came of it. Now, with this, there's some background here that's definitely not here in the presentation. He was accused twice before. He does have 100 victims. If you hear what he said with the numbers, he said, and some can probably be interviewed, but this number was minor victims. So it's almost like he was making it okay with himself, where, well, these children were older, these children were younger. He talks about how he picked out the child that he ultimately got caught for. He picked them out, and you think with a troubled child or anything else that, why would they pick them? Well, it's because they are troubled. It's because they've had all these problems, and people generally don't listen to them. So they're generally not even going to tell to begin with. I don't know for sure if this child told on him and that's what happened, or if how exactly he was caught, but he had all these victims beforehand going from church to church. The problem with some of these is when the child tells an adult what's happening, and the adult hears all of the facts, all the information that they're talking about, the adult almost takes it upon themselves, and they can't picture themselves doing it to a child. So especially an upstanding member of the church like Patrick here, well, then he possibly can't do it because I can't imagine myself doing it. And so unfortunately this happened again and again and again. So how do sex offenders become sex offenders? Let's get into that. 75% of sex offenders started offending when they were children or adolescents. Only 25 to 30% of sexually abused children were sexually abused as children. Who here has heard that all sexual offenders were sexually molested themselves when they were children? So does that number kind of surprise you? So if you think about it, the numbers I gave you for males and females, if that was true, that only people who were molested as children would go on to molest other people, that would mean that we would have many more female molesters than male molesters. This is starting young for them. Not so much as victims, while that is a part of it, it's them starting young sexually offending. The average age at first criminal sex offense is around 12, and 30 to 40% of children who are abused are molested by other children. Most sex offenders start offending via sex play with other children during childhood that goes too far, happens too often, or is repeated. They learn to view children as enjoying or being curious about sex and develop pro-offending attitudes. This doesn't hurt anyone, it's just a game, it tickles, etc. Most children, 60 to 80%, engage in sex play, such as doctor, show and tell, and it's a normal behavior based on curiosity. What we're focusing on is when that becomes something that is more constant, that they're doing it and where they're learning it from and who they're doing it to. When they're starting this young, they realize, hey, this feels pretty good. This is what I like. And as they age, you'll hear about this from some of the other interviews that we're going to listen to. That's what their brain sticks with, is it was a young child that I enjoyed this with. I'm going to keep going to the young children. Now, things that we talk to kids about all the time, bullying, drugs, gun safety, fire safety, always wear a helmet whenever you go on a bicycle, make sure that you're nice and that you're not swearing, that you have good manners, and when they start driving, about how to be safe drivers. We talk about that stuff just all the time, comfortably. I have kids, I'm constantly yelling at them about stuff, and you preach it, but how often do we actually talk about sexual safety? And why can't that be brought into all the other safety things that we're talking about?
Well, that's taboo things.
It's a taboo thing. It's an uncomfortable thing. It's an uncomfortable thing. And the thing is, if we're not talking to them about it, then who is going to talk to them about it? Or where are they going to learn these things from? If they don't feel comfortable asking us questions, how are they going to learn about it? Especially with easy access to the internet, with easy access to other kids who have this type of information, or to the adult offender. We need to help our children stay safe from offenders, but we also need to help our children not grow up to be sex offenders. Ignoring sexual behavior problems during childhood can be a seriously negative outcome. So when we talk about, these are your private parts, it's not okay for someone to look at or touch these. We also need to talk to them about, it's not okay for you to touch or look at other people's private parts. And also with the pornography, it's also not okay for you to look at pictures of people without their clothes on. Bring this into the conversation as well. Some children who are abused or exposed to pornography may act out with other children. The quicker the behavior is identified, the quicker it can be dealt with. It's normal for young children to be curious about where babies come from and the differences between boys and girls and between children and grown-ups. They may want to look at, touch, or rub private parts. Oral sex, penetration, humping, or forceful or manipulative sexual behavior are abnormal in young people, and they need professional assessment. So what happens if you walk in and your kids have their pants down? How do you react? I know what the first reaction is, but when we're talking about this, we need to take it calmly. We need to ask them about why they're doing this, where they learned this from, what they're hoping to learn from doing this. Just open up the conversation. How do we handle it? We do it calmly. We talk to them. Oh, what are you guys doing in here? Tell me about this. Speak with the other parent that may be involved in the situation. If this is something that we talked about where it's much more than just, hey, look at mine, I'll look at yours. If it's something that involves, we'll go back to the other slide, oral sex, penetration, humping, forceful, manipulative sexual behavior are abnormal in young children, and they need professional assessment. When we talk about healthy sexuality, let alone abuse, kids grow up thinking it's not something that's supposed to be talked about and don't tell us when they're being abused. So what do we talk to our kids about to start building this up about sexual health, healthy sexual attitudes and knowledge and actions? Well, we talk to them about respect and healthy boundaries. That's issues related to consent and age differences between partners, sexual coercion, manipulation, and aggression. Example of this, I saw this once at a restaurant where a kid went over to another kid and wanted to give them a hug. And the kid didn't want a hug. And so that child who did not want a hug, his parents said, well, you need to listen to her and hear that she doesn't want a hug. And that was great. These were young kids. I mean, you think, oh, it's just a hug. That's all they want to do. But they're teaching this child who was trying to give the hug in the first place of, hey, when this person says they don't want a hug, then they don't want a hug. And just that early lesson can build up through their childhood and through their growing up that, hey, just this healthy sexual limitations. When, you know, we're not forcing people, we're not doing things against people's wills, and we start that early in their life. Delaying sexual activity, I know that we talk to kids about this pretty frequently, about waiting. And the good things about that is you avoid early pregnancy or sexual transmitted diseases. You avoid sexual exploitation, online or trafficking by peers or adults. And you avoid trauma while increasing the possibility of developing healthy and sustaining relationships. I want to talk about avoiding sexual exploitation. During my investigation years with sexual crimes, I can't tell you how many cases I picked up in the middle school and in the high school where kids were sexting each other. Everyone knows what sexting is, sending explicit photos, messages back and forth to each other. And it goes beyond just the school where they're doing this with strangers. It was crazy to me how quickly these kids were willing to send a nude photo of themselves or information about where they lived. We gotta start talking to them young about this type of stuff, where it's not okay to look at naked pictures, it's not okay to take naked pictures of yourself. If someone is asking you to send them naked pictures of yourself, then you need to tell me about it. So we're looking at Patrick again, that video. We're not going to go back to it, but think about Patrick with this. You remember how I told you that he had about 100 victims before he was caught, plus he'd been accused twice about this before this child that he was finally arrested for. I want you to look at Patrick as the top of this iceberg right here, or the glacier, or whatever this is, glacier, I guess. So look at the top here. This is what he was finally found. This is what finally got him arrested, finally got him in trouble, finally got people talking about this. But then here's everything else that he did right here. Here's the trouble, and this is everything else that people didn't know about beforehand. There's usually a bigger problem than what you're hearing about. Sex offenders commit an average of 120 to 200 separate sexual crimes before they're caught. Typical number of child victims is 8 to 13. Average number of events per victim is 10. 1 out of every 189 males in the U.S. are registered sex offenders. Experts estimate that we are catching fewer than 5% of these offenders. 5 to 10% are female offenders. Limitation of background checks. Think about this. Nope, he's going to be good with the kids because we did a background check, we didn't find anything. Everything that we just talked about, what are we not finding on these background checks? How much, yes sir?
There's a problem on those numbers. There's kind of like that, because I was 15, 16-year-olds, I had 30-year-old women hitting on me all the time. But a lot of parents or dads or whatever, adult influences, if an older female sitting on the younger man, it's like, ooh, that's cool. But when it's the male hitting on the female, it's like, no way.
Yeah.
So we still have that, and to me it's stupid, but it's that, hey, it's cool for the guy, but,
Yeah, and
be hit on, but the younger lady, no.
the way that's covered a lot, we'll have a video here later in the presentation that you might find interesting about that, about how it's presented. And while it is a smaller percentage for the gender, we definitely need to consider that, and not consider that just because it's a female means that the child's going to be safe.
Because there's a lot like TikTok and some of these other Facebook, there's a lot of young ladies that post sexually specific photos of themselves to lure older people in.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things I'm talking about. When we'll go back a couple of slides there, we're talking about the internet safety. We're going to go to internet safety later. I know I keep saying later in the presentation, but that type of stuff definitely leads to sexual trafficking and sexual assaults as well.
Well, it's just like if a male is sexually assaulted by a woman, it goes unreported. Where if a male sexually assaults a woman, it's reported.
And that goes to all the things that we're talking about with the numbers being, we have all these offenders in here and we're only hearing about X% of the crime. Is it because of gender? Is it because of other things? For sure. I hear what you're saying. So when we're talking about earlier here where one of the questions I asked you in the pretest was, is this the only type of crime that they're committing? And the answer is no. Let's talk about that. Most sex offenders commit more than one type of sexual crime. For some, what they get caught for is a fluke. It's about who tells on them. 65 to 70% of offenders sexually abuse children and sexually assault adults or abuse child victims from different age groups. 60% of rape, statutory rape offenders abused younger children. 66 to 75% of child molesters abuse children from different relationship categories. Incest offenders abuse other people's children too, and vice versa. 30% of child molesters abuse boys and girls. So what we need to consider with this, especially the second one from the bottom there, the 66 to 75%, I've heard before, well, yeah, he was accused of raping a girl when he lived in this other city, but when he moved in with us, I have a little boy, so I thought he'd be okay. So this is the cross-offending that we're talking about. Oh yeah, I knew that she liked to touch little girls, so I thought that she'd be fine with my son instead. It's, it's not just one thing that they're going to be doing. How's our state compare? You can see us up there at the top left. National average is 1 in 189 males or sexual offenders. In Indiana, we have 1 in 342. Sex offenders and yellow buses. This is something that I think is just such a great piece of advice here at the bottom. We'll get to it here in just a second. There are offenders living in all of our families, social circles, churches, schools, neighborhoods, and communities. The best defense is an offense, no matter who your relatives are or who lives next door. And we're going to be teaching children more than the yellow car safety. I love this piece of advice because when we're telling kids to only look out for strangers, when we're telling them only stranger danger, and we're not talking about whenever someone that we know, someone who's a friend of the family may be starting to act weird towards them, that's okay because we're only worried about strangers. It's like telling your children that when they cross the street, the only thing they need to be worried about is yellow cars, when there's all the other cars out there on the roadway. You look left and right, and if you don't see any yellow cars, just take off right across the road on the busy highway. Great analogy there. So why do some adults sexually abuse children? Well, they've developed a sexual interest in children. They've developed a pro-offending or criminal attitudes about sexual contact with children. Some don't care about the effect of sexual abuse on children. Number two there, they have developed pro-offending or criminal attitudes about sexual contact with children. That's making it okay to themselves. That's explaining it away to themselves that it's okay that I do this because of X and Y. And again, my promise I keep having here throughout the whole presentation, we are going to talk about those. We're going to watch a video with Sam. He was interviewed about what exactly drew his attention to children and why he was sexually attracted to the type of child that he was sexually attracted to.
My preference, the way my sexuality has been boys first, prepubescent, then teenage, adolescent, then girls. The same thing, prepubescent, then adolescent, and then men, and then women.
So how do you think that came to be? How do you think that ended up becoming your sexual preference in that order?
Well, one of the things I think is that every time that I had some kind of sexual encounter or relationship with a man, it always reminded me or felt like I was with my brother again. So I'm thinking that's probably the biggest part there. I never liked hair, for one thing, because it always reminded me of that same thing, and I never liked the size of a grown-up penis or something like that. As for women, I always had trouble with wanting to be involved with women, partially because I had a curved penis, which I talked about before in there. It's rather severely curved, and I was always very shy about it to where I hid myself. It's like, and that was another thing that actually helped to keep me from offending more kids too, though, was the fact that I didn't want to be offending some kid and have some kids say, well, he's got this, because that's kind of a dead giveaway.
Because they don't identify it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was...
So is that part of why you went after littler boys?
I went after the littler boys, I think, mainly because, like I said, there was a power thing. Also, they don't remind me of my brother. And it seems probably real weird to some people or whatever, but the hairlessness and the penis size makes a big difference to me. It's one of those things that I just find a lot more attractive. It's something that...
So smaller bodies, littler penises, exactly. Lack of hair.
Yeah.
So just the vulnerability, did that play a role in there?
Yeah. When you get to the point of being able to kind of take care of them or help them out, and then that's part of the grooming process, is getting them to trust you, to rely on you, and to actually they'll start believing in you, or even at times they won't want to tell on you just because of the fact that, as far as they can see, you're the best friend they have.
So one of the things that he mentioned there was that the smaller boys made him think of his brother. It goes back to what we were talking about a first sexual experience. He was molesting his brother. He was offending against his brother as a young child. And so that's what brought him back to what felt good the first time for him. His first experience was the younger male there. So everything that you see up here on the screen right now, excuses for offending, distortion, justification, rationalization, and minimization, these are not examples. These are actual things that the people in the study told the doctor about things that they told themselves to make it okay. Just looking at them, a couple here. I didn't know it was wrong. It was an accident. I couldn't help myself. The kids started it. I broke down. I let it happen. It just happened. I wasn't thinking. I didn't hurt them. I was just showing them love and affection. I'm going to show you a video here of a female sex offender, and I want you to hear what she says.
A California woman is serving time for having sex with 2 teenaged boys, including her daughter's 14-year-old boyfriend. Christine Hubbs was known as the Hummer Mom for driving teens around in her SUV and doing much more in that vehicle. She talked exclusively to Dan Noyes with our San Francisco station.
From the outside, Tim and Christine Hubbs appeared to have the perfect life. They met at Brigham Young University, got married at the Mormon Temple in Salt Lake City, had 3 kids, a thriving dental practice in Livermore, California, a 4,600 square foot home, a cabin at Lake Tahoe, fancy cars.
Out of the 22 years of marriage, we've had 20 years that were good. We've had a couple years of rough times.
I have never even smoked a cigarette. I don't drink. I don't do anything.
The rough times started when Christine, who was 40, got involved with 2 14-year-old boys, her daughter's boyfriend at middle school, and later with his best friend.
I have to take responsibility, but I don't want to be portrayed as a predator or someone that went out and forced this on anyone. This was not the case at all.
How were you not a predator?
Well, I knew this boy for a long time.
She's hoping this interview will improve her image, but after I contacted the families of her 2 young victims, they asked police to share the case file with me.
I don't think she really realized that talking to you, now I'm going to talk about it because it's not going to be one-sided.
Investigators say Hubbs groomed her victims by showering them with gifts.
Big screen TV for his birthday, 2 phones, 2 iPods.
Wasn't there a game system as well?
Yes, an Xbox, and I think the PlayStation.
Hubbs spent tens of thousands of dollars.
It's like Christmas every single day when Christine came by because she'll give you cash.
Hubbs took her daughter's boyfriend on several family vacations. A trip to their cabin in Tahoe after Christmas 2008 is where it turned sexual. Christine says she fell asleep with her 2 daughters and the boy in the same queen-sized bed.
I was exhausted, and I don't know what happened. I don't know how I broke down. I don't know how I let it happen.
But when you say that you let it happen, that takes responsibility away from you.
Well, I didn't start it. I didn't touch anything back. It was him, and he started it.
Hubbs claimed she was concerned her kids would wake up, so she walked the 14-year-old to another room.
I wanted him to get out of the room. I asked him to go into the room a couple times, and he didn't want to. And then he pulled me, and then I just went with him. I don't know why.
And what happened in the other room?
Then we had a sexual encounter.
Police say that's not the way it happened. Christine was the aggressor from the start, and that the boy was asleep alone in a bedroom at the cabin.
And he woke up into the middle of the night, Christine walking in with just a coat on, completely naked.
Hubbs admits the sex continued in hotels, in a spare bedroom at the family home, and in the back of Christine's Hummer, this one with the Humdinger license plate. After several months, detectives say the boy finally pulled away.
That's where boy number 2 came in. His best friend. She used his best friend to make him jealous.
Hubbs admits it became physical with the second boy after she gave him a ride home from a party. They parked at a Little League ball field.
Then it just happened. And I don't know, it's my fault.
What happened?
So we just had sex in the back of the car.
In the back of the Hummer?
Christine sent the boys thousands of text messages.
You are mine, 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 so tell all the other girls to F off, I miss your touch.
Many of them are very sexually explicit, and it was her texting that finally got her arrested.
And then I found out that there was some communication going on.
Christine's husband, Tim, had heard rumors about her relationship with the first boy. Late one night, he caught Christine texting him. Tim asked the boy's mother to check his phone. She found a photo of a woman's naked breasts and called Tim to come see it.
Well, I was First of all, shocked, but
Was there any doubt that it was Christine?
no, I knew it was my wife.
The mother called police, and Hubbs was charged with 67 counts. She pled guilty to 4. Unlawful sexual intercourse, oral copulation, person under 16, and 2 counts, lewd act upon a child. Last month, Christine received a 5-year prison sentence.
The worst time is dinner time. Because that's when I should be home, making dinner, getting the kids' homework together, getting them all ready for the next day, and that's when it hits me the most. And I'm in here.
Tim Hubbs says his family is all starting therapy. Despite the damage Christine has caused, he wants to stay married.
I still love her, and so, and I know she still loves me, and we have our children, and so when I got married to her, it was for eternity and through our religion, and that's what I want to make sure that I'd like to stay together if we can work everything out.
For Good Morning America, Dan Noyes, ABC News, San Francisco.
Okay, I know that we went right into the female sex offender with that, but think about everything that you heard her say with that, male and female, any offender, a lot of the same excuses. So how people become sex offenders, this is just a small list, remember. Early exposure to pornography, sexual behavior, or sexual abuse. Repeated sexual contact with other children that was stimulating and arousing. Childhood sexual behavior problems that were not identified and there was no intervention. Adults focused negatively on child sexual play or questions. Inadequate training, role modeling around healthy sexual boundaries and respect. The early exposure to pornography, sexual behavior, or sexual abuse. How easy is it to get on these sites now, especially with the cell phones and with the tablets? Keep an eye on what your children are looking at. Surprise inspections in search of another term, different times. When he said in that video that we just watched that he called this boy's mother and said, look at your son's cell phone right now, and she looked at it right now, do you think that was a usual time for her to look at, or do you think maybe every night at 7 o'clock I'm going to look at your cell phone? Well, to get rid of the stuff that you don't want them to look at, but just looking at it every now and then. When it's not an expected thing, you might be able to find things that you're looking at. And if they're looking at things, don't yell at them. They're not in trouble for that. Talk about what they're looking at, why they're looking at it. If someone sent it to them, who sent it to them? If someone suggested that they look at it, who suggested that they look at it? And that goes down to the adults focus negatively on child sexual play. Just like the slide that we looked at about coming in with the pants down and how to react to that. If a child is asking you lots of questions about their private areas, if they're making jokes about it, they like to just run around naked and everything else, what's going to form a healthy relationship talking about the body? Whenever you speak calmly to them about it, or whenever they're getting yelled and punished for anything having to do with the questions that they ask or the things that you may find them doing or that they may be curious about. Build that healthy relationship with them where you can talk about these types of things with them in a comfortable environment and a calm, supportive manner, and find out exactly what is interesting them in this. So most healthy children experience sexual curiosity and feelings. Most sexual play is normal. Sexual play is not normal when it's aggressive, happens too often, or involves differences in age or cognitive ability. If you need advice or assessment or help, you can call your local child advocacy center. Have the phone number up there for the Marion County. Well, that's going to be the DCS number. If anyone does need a number for the child advocacy center, you can certainly look it up, or I can give it to you if you do need that. Sexual play is not normal when it's aggressive, happens too often, or involves differences in age or cognitive ability. Let's focus on that here real quick. If you had a 20-year-old who only wants to date 13 years old people, is that weird? So don't you think that sexual play involving an 11-year-old who only wants to play sex games with 5 or 6-year-olds should be considered maybe abnormal? Maybe we should get a look at it. Or if they are playing with a kid who has a disability and that's the only person they want to do these sex games with or anything else, and that's what we're finding out about, don't you think that that's something that we may need to find out what's going on and maybe start talking about some treatment? So I've brought this up focusing on stranger danger, we talked about looking for yellow cars on the roadway, but let me show you why stranger danger maybe is not exactly the best thing to focus on to preach to your children. The offender relationship to the victim. Acquaintances or friends of the parent make up for 26% of the cases in the study. Person in authority, a pastor, a teacher, a coach, makes up for 22%. Look at the bottom there, stranger, 5%. I can tell you with the hundreds of cases that I investigated involving a minor child, younger child, there was only one case that I can think of where they did not know who the person was, and it happened at a park. Every other time, it was someone that the family knew. It was a family member. It was a person close in the community. It was a person of authority, like we see there with the pastor, teacher, coach. Many other examples of that. Don't just focus on those three. Only one case that I can think of. Usually when they did not know who the person was that attacked them, that happened in the older age brackets when I looked at that. And then if you see the quote down there at the bottom, probably everyone in this room has someone in their life who's a sex offender. We just don't know who it is. Yes, sir.
One thing, talk about pastor, teacher, coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a head soccer coach.
Mm-hmm.
I don't touch my players.
Good.
And if I have to
You shouldn't.
demonstrate, I have my captain and someone else,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, you know, and I talk
Yep.
through the demonstration. That drives me nuts when I go to a high school football game or a pee wee football game, baseball, basketball, and those coaches are sitting there smacking right on the butt.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is, if a parent touches my kid on the butt, I'm telling him,
Yeah.
you don't do that again.
We're going to be talking about red flags here in just a bit with something like that, so we'll focus on that here in just a second. I know I keep saying it later in the conversation here.
I saw that, I was like,
All right.
it's irritating.
So some offenders only offend girls, other offenders only offend boys, some do both. We're looking at about 30% here in the study. Hands-on versus hands-off. So while we're talking about people who are touching the kids, who are sexually assaulting the kids, we also need to consider peeping and exposing themselves to children. Excessive internet contact, excessive or exclusive internet contact, and child pornography. Violent versus seductive offender. Most sexual abuse of children involves manipulative grooming prior to offending. They make children believe it's normal or a game. They also make children believe they went along with it or were okay with it. And that's because, children are not, they're going to think, this feels good. How can this be bad if it feels good? And when the offender starts talking to them about, hey, how did that feel? Well, it felt good. Yeah, so, maybe that's okay. How do offenders molest? 95% of offenders are known to their victim and the victim's family. This makes it difficult for a child to understand why they may be a victim to this person. Again, because of stranger danger. It's hard for them to understand that someone they love is hurting them when the behavior is made to feel good and it's disguised and mixed with affection or play. Most offenders think of child sexual abuse as seduction. Think about the person you fell in love with, the person that you dated, how you built up the relationship. You didn't immediately just get married at the sight of the person. You didn't immediately just start dating them when you saw them. It was kind of a longer process maybe. And that's how they view it with the child, is that they're just building up this relationship. Some find it more arousing when they make the child feel like a partner. 68% of offenders do not cause physical harm or pain to the child. They avoid believing that the child will be frightened or they feel violated with this physical harm or pain. And that's why also only 5% of cases result in physical evidence. Something that we've seen in all these videos so far is the child is not telling somebody about what happened. Or when they do tell, they're not believed. This is another clip. This is Becca. She's a gymnast who was molested by her coach. And it was because of how her parents thought that he was acting, that something came about, and then they approached her directly to ask her about this. Just because your child is not telling you that something is weird to them or something is affecting them doesn't mean that it's not doing it. We need to make sure to pay attention to the child's surroundings for them because they're too young to understand what's going on. Or they think that with a person that they trust or a person in authority that it's okay that they're doing it. A family member, it's okay that they're doing it because it feels good or it's because that person loves me or because of the grooming process that's turned up to it. So here's another example of the parents discovering something once they thought something was strange. Don't know if this one's going to want to play for me. Here we go. Nope. Okay, I'm going to have to just kind of gloss over what that one was. What it was a gymnast. Her coach pretty much followed her all the way from her beginning gymnastics training to when she was competing in national contests and everything else. He actually moved when the family moved as well to follow them to this new city, just under the guise of, well, I just really enjoy coaching your daughter. When she was not going to make a certain meet, he came over and begged her to go to it and cried in front of the family about it, and that's when they finally said, there's something's weird here. When they asked their daughter, Rebecca, directly what's going on, that's when they found out about the abuse from the coach to her. What offenders say about how they pick communities? They're looking for neighborhoods with churches, youth sports, community organizations such as Scouting, YMCA, etc., that offer access to children. The offender's past behavior is probably unknown in the new setting. People in a new setting are often open, trusting, friendly, tolerant, accepting, and naive, poorly informed and may have loose boundaries, and unwilling to confront questionable behavior. These offenders may try to befriend a family or live with or work or be around children, work or volunteer with agencies that serve children and families. They say that churches are unfortunately particularly easy targets. They're looking for families that are vulnerable, too trusting and gullible, looking for families where parents and children aren't close and don't communicate. They're looking for single-parent homes and families that are too stressed. They're looking for families that don't supervise their children closely. They're looking for parents who are not involved in their children's lives, relationships, or activities. Families that aren't very assertive. Possible prior victimization of parents. And families who indiscriminately trust other people. Now that second one from the bottom is interesting, that they're looking for possible prior victimization of parents. And that is interesting to me because it seems like that parent would be more in tune with what was going on. But remember what we talked about earlier when it's, well, they're not acting like I acted like when I was a victim of this, so it must be okay for them. When people are asking a little too many questions about anything or anything else, it's just something to look out for there. Because even though they may seem like part of the group, they may actually be a wolf in sheep's clothing. So talking about that, how are we seducing adults and offending at home? Well, they're becoming a pillar of the community. They're making sure to go out of their way to tell people how we should hang offenders. I just hate sexual offenders. And they're setting themselves up for, well, I can't possibly be doing this because remember I told you we should hang offenders. Being helpful and polite, these the last three are within the family. Not supporting a child's other relationships, developing a controlling or peer-like relationship with the victim, or keeping another parent overwhelmed and disconnected by not helping with housework or discipline. How they pick their child victims? Well, we were listening to that with Patrick and then with Sam later. They're looking for someone that they can get close to, develop a relationship with, they're sexually and emotionally attracted to, that they can control and manipulate into keeping their abuse a secret, and can discredit in front of other people. Remember how the minister was doing that with the child. Hey, he's been in and out of these systems, he's a problem child. They're attracted to children because of their age, their gender, their vulnerability and innocence, their poor or limited relationships with caretakers and peers, the kids that have lower self-esteem, lack of confidence, lonely, needy, unassertive, insecure, poor boundaries or awareness of instincts, like the kids who will let anyone hug them or like to sit on different people's laps. They can be easily bribed, intimidated, or manipulated. And that's more than just toys and candy. That's experiences like what the Hummer mom was doing with the vacations and everything else. And insufficient supervision or too much time alone. What else puts children at higher risk for abuse? Having relatives, family, friends, or neighbors who are offenders, both known or unknown. If abused before, then they're 5 times more vulnerable. Keep this information private. If you're involved in any sort of investigation where your child has been a victim, that's information to keep to yourself and to other trusted people. There has been cases that I've looked into. There has been things found here in the study where people see these kids in more of a sexual light when they find out that they've been a victim. And so then they go and try to offend as well. We're going to look at a group therapy session where they're talking about grooming tactics here. Hopefully this one will play for us.
The predator isn't the guy in the bushes picking up the kids off schoolyards. There is that, and that gets a lot of headlines. But it's people in your lives.
Child molester. Molested my daughter when she was 4 years old. I was 29.
Child molester. I molested my stepdaughter of 12 years old. I'm 40.
If I had thought about my daughter and what I was doing to her and how it was affecting her, I wouldn't do it. So I had to manipulate my mind into making it that it really wasn't hurting her. She wouldn't remember, and all this fabrication stuff to make it okay so I could do it.
For me, it was a process of making it okay. She's a sexual being. She's old enough. She didn't say no, whatever, hundreds of them, depending on who my victim was. The one daughter that I molested over a period of a couple of years, told her that I was in love with her, felt like I was in love with her at the time, told her that the only reason that I wouldn't tell everybody was that it would destroy our family.
Just the feeling of knowing that she was a family member, I just felt that she wouldn't tell, not so much as to where I told her not to. I never really came out and said, don't tell, this will ruin us or whatever, but it was more or less just feeling that she wouldn't tell because she was a family member.
Most of my victims were, single mother environments, and I was step in and act like an adult, treat them, equally. And I would groom myself over a period, maybe a year or two, of masturbating to deviant fantasies about the young girl asking me to teach her. I would do little things like, part of grooming, wrestling with her, touching her accidentally, giving her hugs and little hen pecks, and just seeing each time how far I could go. And then at one point when I felt safe enough, I'd ask her, well, can I give you a big kiss, a French kiss, like an adult, or have you ever seen a penis, and would try to get her talking sex about her and, try to break down the barriers a little at a time, and every step was a step farther. And then if I felt that she reacted or was scared, then I'd back off from that particular girl and maybe look for a new girl. I'd go to my wife beforehand and say, I did something a little strange. The girl may take it wrong and come to you, but don't worry. It's all misunderstanding. And so if the girl did come and say, he touched me, my wife would say, oh, okay, I already know, he told me. It was a misunderstanding.
So that was a deliberate ploy to make sure that if a child tried to report, that child would not be taken seriously.
Yep, because...
You thought that out beforehand?
Yeah.
Okay.
I really did, because they always tell children to report what happens to them, but most kids aren't believed.
Did you worry about the effect on the child of you telling the officials that the child was lying? You say it wasn't true. It's like you're saying in your case, stepdaughter is telling a fib. Did you worry about that was kind of adding insult to injury? Or?
I did, no.
Didn't think about it?
Well, I didn't care.
So everything that they're saying, one of the main ideas I want you to take from that is how slowly they're setting things up for these things to happen, how they're setting it up so that they could get away with it, so that they could do it and it wouldn't seem abnormal to the child. Has anyone ever seen that picture before or know what that's referring to? It's a frog in a boiling pot of water. It's the idea that if you put a frog on a pot with water with no heat under it and slowly increase the heat until it's boiling. They won't jump out because they keep getting used to it as it gets worse and worse to the point where they're in pretty big trouble right there. So things that they're talking about there that we can look at here: over-compliment, act like a peer, or treat the child as if older. Did you hear the guy say, now can I give you a big kiss? Now can I give you a French kiss like adults do? Making them feel older there, like they're part of it. Eroding the boundaries, I think someone talked about that, by walking in on them undressing or bathing, or allowing them to walk in on you. Again, getting used to, he sees my naked body, so it's okay if he does it because he's walked in many times. And he's also looking for the reaction. How are they going to react to that whenever they walk in on him naked? What's the reaction like, and how can they build on that? Getting physical in front of parents, it seems that this one is surprising to me because it seems like, hey, if I see someone doing this to my child, well, I'm definitely not going to be okay with that. But when they're wrestling or playing a tickle game, when it's just the beginning stages of it with the child and the parents there watching, that's what the parent sees. Oh, I've seen him wrestle with them before. They just kind of, he picks them up and puts them over here. So if he's talking about a wrestling game, that's what he's talking about because that's what I've seen. He's getting the parents used to this as well. He or she is getting the parents used to this as well as, well, I call this my tickle game, and I tickle their ears. That's what the tickle game is. And then he keeps calling it the tickle game with the child as it progresses more and more. So when the child says, he played the tickle game with me, no, I saw that tickle game. He tickled your ears. That's nothing. You had the person who said that he approached his wife and says, hey, something kind of weird happened. I think that she's going to misinterpret it. And so he says that when the girl told her mom about it, the mom said, oh, no, he already told me that was nothing.
When someone starts talking like that, always go ask them straight up in the eyes what you did.
Yeah.
They will tell you what they did.
Oh, offender tricks, if the child reacts negatively to it, they're going to back off and try again later. That means that they've gone too far too fast with the child, so they're going to have to start building it back up, and they have all the patience in the world to do this. Going to make it seem like it's normal or act like it's a game, just like what we talked about with this is the tickle game. It's something simple like that, and then I just accidentally touched you in a private part. I didn't mean to do that. Back off, go back into it again. So how offenders are keeping their children from telling, most of the kids they don't have to tell the children not to tell. Like I was talking about earlier, with anything in place, the child may be too uncomfortable or may not know what had happened because of the grooming that was used. And so they may not be telling because they don't understand what just happened to them was sexual abuse. Since it's offenders usually someone that the child and the family are close to and depend on, some children are afraid they won't be believed. Again, these things in quotation marks are not examples. It's what actual offenders were saying. Children believe that someone will get in trouble or that their family will break up. In that video we just watched, he was talking about how the family would fall apart if the person did say anything. It's not a threat, just, hey, this type of stuff we need to keep it secret because, we could get in big trouble for this. And the more incidents, the less likely the child will be to disclose. Do children lie? Yeah. Who all in here is a parent? How many times in your life do you feel like you've been lied to? A lot, right? Do children lie? But yeah, I can tell you that out of all the allegations in this study, that 95% of the allegations turned out to be true. That's a low percentage. So do children lie? Yeah, they do, but are they maybe lying about what exactly happened to them? Or are they telling you the whole truth about everything? Are they telling you just a little bit? A lot of times the kids will tell you just a little bit to see how you're going to react to it. Yeah, well, he touched my bottom. It was just a couple seconds, though. Oh, okay, if it was just a couple seconds, that's okay. Okay, well, mom and dad said that's okay, so I guess everything else must have been okay, too. Expand these things. Unfounded versus false allegations. When you hear about court cases or investigations being unfounded, it doesn't exactly mean that it didn't happen. It just means that the evidence isn't there. And as you saw with a lot of these cases are hard to investigate. These cases are hard to prosecute. Just because a lot of times you're not finding out about it until years later, and by then it's one word versus the other. What to do if the child is abused. This is very important. Very important. Don't press for details. If they start telling you, that's when you need to start getting in touch with the authorities, with the Department of Child Services. That's when you need to start the investigation right there. That's not for you to keep pressing them, then what happened, because they're going to see the way that you're reacting, and based on your reaction, they may clam up, this is really upsetting mom, this is really upsetting dad, I probably shouldn't say any more about it. Or if it's just being poo-pooed away, oh, well, they don't believe me, I'm not going to tell anyone else about it. So you need to believe and support them. You need to stay calm and limit the discussion. That means avoid having the child repeat themselves. Do you want your child to have to relive this over and over and over again by saying this over and over again? A lot of cases I had got hurt pretty quickly because, what happened to you? Oh, well here, now tell grandma about what happened to you. Tell her what her son did to you. Okay, now you're going to tell your aunt, you're going to tell the wife of this person what they did to you. Okay, now you're going to tell your cousin, you're going to tell the child of this person. And so they're telling it over and over again. They're telling it to different people. They're getting different reactions from these different people, and it's hurting the child, it's hurting the case. Repeating over and over again. You hear about it, you shut it down, you get the authorities involved immediately. You can call the child abuse hotline, which is right there, or your local police department as soon as possible. Let them know that you're glad that they told you and that you'll take care of these things, and follow through with that. Everyone should see themselves as a mandatory child abuse reporter. Everyone. I'll just let the school handle this because they're supposed to. No, just make the call yourself. Otherwise, you don't know if it's going to be made or not. Get help for your child and for yourself after something like this. This isn't something that only affects the child, of course, it affects the child a tremendous amount. It's going to keep affecting them for the rest of your life. But this is something that the entire family needs to get help with, counseling with, when something like this has occurred. Because with support and good treatment, most victims can recover. And these things, they seem like common sense, but I have definitely seen all these things in my years of investigating. Don't allow contact between the child and the offender after they've said something about it. Don't confront the offender. That's going to hurt your case because the offender can go ahead and start building up their reasonings, their defense, their story, and also may get you in trouble if you feel like you need to go confront the offender and harm them. Most guilty offenders lie and deny their guilt. They prepare for and they rehearse their defense. Again, all these things are in quotation marks because they were actually said. I told people she was mad at me because I punished her. She said it because she wanted to go live with her mother. I said she accused me because I wouldn't let her date, and so on and so on. How did the person keep people who were asking them about it from calling the police? I told them it was an accident, a mistake, or the first time something like this has ever happened. Has anyone in here ever accidentally had sex? Has anyone in here ever accidentally fondled somebody or molested someone on accident? How does that make sense? I told them that I felt terrible and I was going to seek therapy. I've had a case derailed because of that before, because the person decided they weren't going to tell, and then when we finally did find out, a lot of the stuff was gone. Made the case very tough because the person said, I'm sorry, I can't go to jail, I'll get therapy immediately. Okay, I'm going to trust you. And then, of course, it kept happening over and over again. Does treatment work? Yeah, depends on the offender. Good sex offender treatment helps reduce response rates, but that can never cure anyone. Treatment requires lifetime intervention and safety behavioral rules. And anyone, this is very important, who has committed a sexual crime should never, ever be left alone with a child. We talked about that earlier where, well, it doesn't fit what they were doing earlier, so they're probably okay with my child. They should not ever be left alone with a child. So get to know your neighbors. Remember that even sex offenders have rights, and I say that again so that you're not getting yourself in trouble. And also helps with the investigation, helps with just the overall community involvement with them. Inadequate housing and employment makes them more dangerous. That goes with how they do have rights. If you see something suspicious or have questions, call corrections or police. And I have the phone number there for the County Sheriff's Office, Community Corrections Sex Offender Team. Is anyone writing any of this down that you need me to keep it up there? I'm going to try to get through all this. We'll do some questions here at the end. What doesn't work? This is advice from molesters. See the quotation marks? It means it was actually said by them. Well, there's no quotation marks on this, but this was told by them during the study. Thinking that no one you know is an offender, depending on children to protect themselves, expecting that children will be able to tell someone, not having a close relationship with your children, not having adequate rules about supervision, ignoring children's sexual acting out, only talking about stranger danger, no-go tell, and good touch, bad touch, and relying on background checks. What works? Taking responsibility and educating yourself, trusting your instincts but not being overly confident, being alert and confronting offender behavior, talking to your children and preparing them, teaching and maintaining healthy rules and boundaries, giving honest, accurate answers when your child asks about body parts and sex, developing a close, supportive relationship with your children, and being open to the possibility of sex abuse and reporting it. How to talk to children about abuse and offender behavior. Make sure to blend that sex abuse talk in with other safety talks. Private parts are to be considered private and special. I would also suggest using correct terms for body parts, getting them comfortable, being able to say my penis, my vagina, my breasts, my bottom. Letting them know if anyone tries to touch or look at these private parts or tries to get them to touch or look, to have your child tell you as soon as possible. Make a list of other people that they can tell. This is between you and the child that you guys are deciding that. Tell them I won't be mad at you if it happens and you won't be in trouble. Talk about secret touching, not just good, bad touch. Secret touching, with the good, bad touch, things that we've said before, when I started investigations in this matter, whenever we'd interview children, it'd be touch that mommy or daddy or that a doctor wouldn't do. But then all the things happen with the doctor up there at Michigan State, University of Michigan, with the gymnastics doctor, and so we stopped doing that. So it's any touching that makes you uncomfortable, talk to us about it. Anything that person says, now don't tell people that I touched you there, the secret touching. Describing abuse as a touching problem that's similar to stealing or lying. Don't call sexual abuse a sickness, an illness, or a disease, because this can be confused for the child when a person says, well, I'm sick, so don't tell anybody. Then they're going to feel bad for that person. They may not tell because of the confusion with what exactly sick means. Review this about 3 or 4 times a year. Talk about tricks that someone might use to molest them or keep them from telling, such as it's a game, it's okay to do, etc. Child supervision tips. Pay attention to the people who spend time with your child. Watch people who wrestle, tickle, massage, or play touching games with your children. Be involved in your child's activities. Attend and volunteer to help with sports clubs and camps. Be attentive at parks, pools, and men's room. Some sexual offenders have talked about just the joy that they get out of exposing themselves to children and getting the reaction from the child. Something to do whenever you have an opposite sex child and they're getting too old to go to the bathroom with you and they start going into bathrooms by themselves, go ahead and embarrass them by just saying, Mom's going to be out here and she's waiting for you, before they go into the bathroom. That lets people know that you are definitely around and that you are expecting the child to come out quickly. Monitor babysitting. If your child goes to a babysitter, kind of like what we're talking about with looking at phones, looking at computers at a certain time every day, mix it up. Mix up pickup times, mix up times when you're going to stop in to check on the child, just so you're not developing a pattern just in case there's anything bad going on. Monitor children walking to and from school alone. Buddy system's always a great thing, always a great thing. And talk to your children about pornography and restrict access and exposure to it. We talked a lot about internet safety at the beginning. Use the internet with your children and know who your child's talking to online. It's very important. Put the computer in the family room. Monitor cell phones and other electronic devices. Most of these devices have similar capabilities as computers. Communicate with your child about not sending inappropriate photos, text, or videos that they should respond if they receive inappropriate material, or how they should respond, I'm sorry. Learn about internet parental controls and routinely check the history on the address bar, and set up family rules about meeting people or giving out personal information on the internet. I'm going to skip over this video just for interest of time. I think that we're kind of starting to cut it close here. Who has seen Dateline to Catch a Predator? Or you know what I'm talking about when I say that. This was a news story out of Portland, Oregon, that they had set up something through internet safety with children where a guy had come expecting to have sex with an underage child. So red flags that we need to look out for. Anyone's been accused of, arrested for, or convicted of molesting or sexually assaulting a child should never be left alone with children. Even if they say, hey, I was found not guilty, it was found to be completely bogus, they should not be trusted around children regardless. Anyone's been convicted of any type of sexual crime should be monitored around children. Remember the crossover studies, and we were talking about, well, they'll be okay with my child because they were accused of this with an older child or with an opposite sex child. If they appear to be hypersexual or have poor boundaries, if they seem preoccupied with child sexual development, if they make sexual comments to or about children, if they act flirty around children or teens, if they act jealous of children or jealous of teens' relationships with one another, if they accidentally touch private parts, accidentally in quotation marks there, if they engage in frequent physical contact with children such as wrestling, tickling, horseplay, hugging, or lap sitting, if they don't allow children privacy such as walking in on them while they're dressing or using the restroom, even if they claim it was an accident, if they behave like children or allow children to do questionable or inappropriate things, if they override parents, if they're liked by children for reasons that parents don't understand. I had a house back where I used to work that I had several cases come out of, and each time there just wasn't enough on it, but this person was letting kids come over to his house. His house was the hangout spot. He had let them come over, but they knew that they had to be there, and they couldn't drink, they couldn't do drugs, they had a list of chores they had to do whenever they were at the house. And parents just let their kids go over there for some reason. And the number of reports that got out of there about this guy was just, it was mind-numbing. If they work with children, then spend their free time doing special things with the children. If they don't have children but seem to know a lot about the current fads or music popular with children and teens. If they volunteer with youth groups but do not have children in those groups. Here's a big one, private access. Even if they tell you that they have given this information to children. When I refer to that, I am talking about, well, all your kids have my cell phone number and they know they can call me whenever they have a problem. Your kids have my personal email address. Your kids are my social media friends and I can contact them. They can contact me whenever they have anything. I think that it's setting it up for a bad situation. And I know that there's lots of rules in a lot of these different activities in communities where that's not allowed. That any phone calls about the kids should be between the parents, should be between the people in charge there. Any emails should go through an official account there that can be reviewed, that can be looked at, and that parents have access to, that they are the ones communicating. There is no reason why an adult should be only communicating with your child where something secret can be set up or conversations can be had that you do not know what is going on. Too good to be true, red flags. When they buy children special gifts for no reason. When they want to take children on outings that include their being alone with those children. They seem to be able to infiltrate family and social functions or are always available to babysit. When they seem too good with kids or just too good to be true. So wrapping up here, 90 to 95% of people would never molest a child. Nevertheless, be open to the possibility that you probably know someone who has these problems. Adults, not children, are responsible for the safety of children. Let me say that again. Adults, not children, are responsible for the safety of children. For too many years, we've only been focusing on stranger danger, and you need to tell us whenever something bad happens to you, that's putting all of the pressure on the child, that's putting all the work on the child. As adults, as parents, as caring members of the community, we need to be able to protect our children from this type of assault. At least 95% of allegations are true. Most victims can overcome, especially if they are believed and the crime is reported. It's best for everyone if we all report. The victim, family, and offender need to get good treatment. Add my own 2 cents in there. I think it's very important to start off with proper names of body parts of children so that they can be very distinct and accurate with what they're describing to people. I'll echo again that we are the ones who are responsible for our children's safety. We should not put anything on them. And we just need to watch out for each other. Any questions? Did you have one from earlier?
Well, being in a lot of positions I've been, when someone comes to you, and especially a child, and they're coming up to you to tell you something, especially it, whether it be sexual abuse or this or that.
Mhm.
They're coming to you because they trust you and they want to talk to you in confidence.
Yep.
And very important, before you, when they come talk to you, the next phone call, especially, child molesting, call these guys, because even if it's mom, dad, brother, or uncle, there's a possibility that they might find out that there's other people doing the same thing, that there's some,
Right.
the domino effect.
Yep.
But then after you make the phone call, and then you can, tell, your spouse, everything, because it's very important these guys get involved
Yep.
like that.
That's why we all need to be considered people who report. Don't count on someone else to do it. If you hear it, do it.
Because as soon as you start talking like this, because if it's someone, especially in the family, it'll go right back to them, and they go through the defense thing and run. I had a boss that was doing it to a lot of young ladies who ran the back, and he stayed in Indiana.
Yeah. Any other questions? I'll give you a list here at the end. If you want to write any of these down, or you can ask me after everything's done. I'll be happy to share it with you. Recommended books, videos, and organizations. That's provided by the training. My own personal recommendations. There's a series called Unbelievable on Netflix about a rape investigation that shows kind of two sides to it, and also a book called The Monsters We Make I thought was very accurate about the grooming process of a child who was a victim. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your attention. I'll be here if you have any questions afterwards. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I started this off a little fast. I was trying to keep holding everybody up. We were trying to hold it off. We were trying to start right at 6. Started around 6:10, 6:15. I want to thank Ray Tice. Awesome presentation. Opened my eyes to a lot of things being a father. Thank you. I learned a lot tonight that I did not know before. Makes me have the chills thinking about it. But hope everybody took something from it. Once again, I'm Jeremy Howery. This is Lieutenant Jacob McAtee. We are your community liaisons for your Crime Watch. We usually have a board. This is new to us. You got to remember, this is our first time being here as well. If you want to get a hold of us about anything you don't want to talk about tonight, but I want to open up the floor right now for any questions anybody has about anything that I can answer or that Lieutenant McAtee may be able to answer. Go ahead.
I live in Pinewood Village Apartments, and the management group does a good job of, putting out different stuff through emails and stuff, but is there a actual neighborhood crime watch? Because we get a lot of people that are either homeless or walking the Carriage House West or just passing that cut through our apartment complex constantly.
Question was, is there a crime watch number or a crime number? So if you're wanting to report a crime, there's a non-emergency number.
Right, I understand it, but I'm just saying, do you guys know of, I know some neighborhoods and that they have a community crime watch association or, a bunch of people together.
So
You know this.
this is it. This is your chance, and you're meeting us now. COVID kind of shut it down. We all have a lot more people each time. Now that we're open and the more COVID goes away, maybe, right? We'll get more people to come.
Is there a group for Pinewood?
There is not a group for Pinewood Village. I'm your go-to. Lieutenant McAtee's your go-to.
Can we do something?
That would be up to your community. That would be up to your community, and I'll be honest with you, we reached out to Pinewood Village, and I don't know if anybody else lives here with Pinewood Village, but you're here out of everyone that lives there.
Gotcha.
So, but like, as far as people crossing over and things of that nature, if it's a crime in progress or something you don't feel is right, you call the non-emergency number, and we'd be more than happy to introduce ourselves to that subject. Yep. Anybody else have any questions, concerns before we wrap it up tonight? I want to thank everybody for coming. I know it's a low crowd. I appreciate you guys taking your time to come. Each and every one of you. It'll get better as we go with COVID doing what it's doing. And now that everybody can be around each other again without fearing death. So, all right. Y'all have a good night. Thanks.